So do you remember I just showed you where I upgraded my internal scratch drive for editing? So we went from a 500 gigabyte drive to a 2 terabyte internal scratch drive for video editing. This is going to be one of the reasons why. Now, the main reason why is, again, because of the Pro Tutorial. It's taken up all the space on the hard drive. I had no room to do any other projects. However, a couple of weeks ago, check out this video here, where I went out with Lee Hall picking salsify seeds, and I said to him, let's document it, let's make a little video. So I took out the EOS R to record. And normally I use the 80D to do this, but the EOS R has fantastic digital stabilization. That was used all through that film. Now, a lot of people slate this camera, nothing wrong with it. They slate the digital image stabilization that's in it. As you can see from that video, there's nothing wrong with it. And it got me wondering, right, I want a mirrorless camera for doing the video, so I want to upgrade the 80D. Now, you're looking at the 80D now. Now, I did have my eyes on the R5, but unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be the best tool for my workflow. I'm not going to get into the hows and whys of that right now, but the EOS R is. And what I did is I've gone and bought a second EOS R just for video. So we're going to unbox this. Got a great price on it, and the price difference from this and a brand new one was around £600 to £700. Then the money I saved from that I've put into the studio lights. So you are going to see a massive change in a bit, where I'm going to set up all the new studio lights. I've got some new microphones, some wireless lav mics. We're going to change things up just a little bit, but this was the key factor. Now, with this being second hand, I have no idea if it's been pre-cleaned, whether the sensor's been cleaned, and I have my EOS R here. And my aim is to give it a really deep clean so that we can put this RF 35mm onto this camera, and in theory, that lens should never have to come off the camera body for the next several years, because any B-roll that I will do with a macro lens will be on this particular camera, not that one. So I was umming and ahhing whether to do a video or not, because I'm mostly known as a macro photographer, but a lot of people are getting interested now in the behind the scenes stuff. How am I filming my videos? How do I set up my studio? So I have decided, from now, I am going to start covering lighting, video specs, stuff like that, how to do videos. I'm starting to do macro videography, albeit not very good at the moment, but we are starting to do that. So the first thing I wanted to do was to cover this, because with the R5 being released, there is an absolute load of these little babies coming onto the second-hand market. Now, I'm going to take a guess that this has been well used, but it does only have 4,000 actuations on the shutter, which is very good. Way lower than my current EOS R. So I have a new battery charger, which no one ever uses them. I have a spare battery now as well, that's great. Cables, all these cables, literally, they'll just go in the cupboard because I already have them all, because of having already got an EOS R. But what I'm interested in is the camera itself. So the battery, definitely want that. All this, that can go. Again, it's not needed because I already have an EOS R. Let's take a look at this. Let's just see how badly treated it's been treated, shall we? Okay, so I don't know if you're going to be able to see that. That there is the reason it was much cheaper than the others, because the normal ones on there that are second hand are £1,350, but because of that little scratch, I saved £80, which is basically a free reflector for the studio lights. We've got a scratch on the screen, nothing to worry about. I mean, this one here, I've dropped this 3 times since I've had it. So, you know, in theory, this camera is probably in better condition than my own EOS R. So we need some cleanup on the EVF. We have some dust and grime inside there. Take a look inside here. So what I'm going to do, I mean, there's a little scratch here on the mounting, which is, that's perfectly okay, you know what I mean? Second hand, I've saved me £700 odd with this. But what I'm going to do now is, because again I've spent that money on studio lights, okay, I'm going to clean the camera inside and out. Makeup brush. Now there's a video here if you don't know how to clean the camera, okay? Clean the sensor, clean the outside of it. I'm going to put 35mm from my photography camera, my photography EOS R, onto this EOS R, set everything up, new microphones and new lights, the EOS R over there in 4K, and we'll switch to it now. Cool, there we go. I think this looks way better than it did before. Now, anyone who is interested, I've got two Godox SL60Ws. One has the background light, which is the blue, one's got blue Jill on. The one at the front here is a key light with a deep softbox on it with a grid. That's as much detail as I'm going to go into at the moment because I will cover those in a future video. Let's get on with this EOS R, shall we? So the first thing we want to do is to come into the menu, and what I want to do is I want to clear all the camera settings. I'm going to clear those camera settings because whoever used it before is not going to use it for the same thing I'm using it for. So I want to clear those settings out. The firmware, we're at version 1.40. There is a newer firmware version than that, so we're going to do that now. First thing I want to do is to turn off the camera, and I'm going to take the battery out because I don't know how much charge is going to be in there. I very rarely rely on the camera telling me how much charge is in there when it comes to firmware. I'd rather put in a brand new charged battery because we don't want the camera to cut out halfway through upgrading the firmware. So the first thing you need to do is go to the Canon website, type in your camera model, and you'll find a firmware there. You can then download that to your computer. Once it's there, you unzip it and you copy over the firmware to a memory card that you then install into the camera. So now that's been done, we're going to go to the menu, firmware update. Current firmware is version 1.4 and we're going to go OK. Now unfortunately you can't see the output of this on the monitor, but if you look at the overhead camera here, so firmware, please select a new version with version 170. OK, so we're going to go from 1.40 to 1.70. Click OK. So like it says there, warning, do not turn off the power switch or touch any button. So what we're going to do is we're just going to leave that now to do its firmware upgrade. Now I always keep my firmware up to date. It's every time there's a new lens come out, they update the firmware, but they also update the firmware to fix little bugs that are with the camera. So I do like to keep it updated. Okay, so we are done on that now. What we got to do is click OK. And hopefully our EVF comes back on, and there we go, our EVF is back on. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to configure this camera for video, okay? I'm going to do a separate video on how I configure my EOS R for macro photography. But for this particular project, it is a new video camera, so we are going to set it up for video. So the first thing that I want to do is to tell it that I want to go to video. So we're going to go to mode, press the info button to switch to the video modes. And I'm going to select, I'm going to go manual. Okay, so everything is on full manual. And the first thing we want to look at, let's go in order. Okay, so movie quality. So this is going to be custom menu number 1. So it's custom function number 1. For that, I want to do 4K all eye, except there's no 24p on here. Okay, so let me show you how to fix that. The camera's shipped with an NTSC mode or a power mode. Now what I found is most computers, most TVs, they can display both formats. So for me, I prefer to have the option for 24p. That way, when I shoot in 60p, which is 60 frames a second, I can slow it down by 40%, which is great. So we're going to switch over to NTSC. So even though I'm in the UK, I'm still going to use NTSC. It gives me the option, as you can see here, to use 4K 24p all eye. That's the best quality this camera is going to produce. But at the same time, I can also shoot at 60 frames a second and get that extra 10 frames a second for slow motion, which is great. Both of these, the 24p and the high frame rate, are disabled. Movie cropping is disabled. Sound recording, we just keep that on auto. And movie digital IS I will leave off because the majority of my shooting is in the studio. Now when I go outside, that is when we will turn on the digital movie stabilization, but I may save that as a preset number 2. So next, lens correction aberration on, distortion all on. I'll turn all of these on. Okay. Remote control is disabled, exposure compensation, none of this we need to worry about for video. White balance. Now this one is important. So I'm going to go over to colour temperature, and I'm going to set the temperature to the same temperature that my studio lights are set at, which conveniently is near enough the same temperature as the outside, which is, that's the whole purpose of having a daylight balanced bulb. It's the same colour as you would get outside, so I don't need to touch that if I go outside or indoors. But again, you've also got the option of switching on auto white balance if you want to. But what I've found is with auto white balance, sometimes it changes between shots. So if you don't want to colour correct your footage, you might want to turn the auto white balance off. But generally, I colour correct near enough 100% of my shots. Even the shot you're viewing here is colour corrected. So, here you go. Right, so picture style, you can ignore that because when we go to the log settings, we're going to turn on 8-bit log. Now we can't do 10-bit because that's external. So we'll stick to 8-bit for now until we get a newer camera, which is going to be next year now. View assist, I want on. That way, when the wife looks at the back of the screen, she'll see near enough what she's going to get. I'm okay looking at a log footage. I can tell that it's okay. But the wife, she needs that. Characteristics. Sharpness, I usually go to 00. Okay. That's 200. And again, these are just how I set it up. Now, you can copy these settings if you want to. If you like the quality that my videos are producing, just copy these settings. But I do encourage you to play around with the settings. Right, high ISO noise reduction. I'm going to put that to... Oh, press the wrong button. I'm going to put that to disable. Any noise reduction I will do in post in Premiere myself. Autofocus method needs to be tracking. I detect autofocus, enable. That's all okay. Focus peaking, I want on. Okay, that's okay. Electronic, yeah, that's okay. Okay, right. That one, we don't need to worry about playback. Okay, so on this particular one, eco mode we want off. Power saving, I'm going to keep that like it is. What I will do is as I use the EOS R for video, I will get used to that. But what I have found is no matter what those power saving settings are, when you press record, it overwrites that anyway. That's okay. Okay, the time is already set up. Video system we've already done. Touch control standard, beep enable, battery info, sensor cleaning, all that stuff doesn't need doing. Okay, we've already cleaned the system, so that's okay. A couple of things we need to check out is the make sure our exposure level increments are at 1/3 of a stop. And most of these we can skip past. But the one we want to look at is the customizable buttons and customizable dials and customizable M function bar. What we want to do is customize buttons. We have two settings, the left hand setting, which is here, and a right hand setting. So this is for photo, this is for video. So we're going to go to the video settings and I'm going to find this button here and I want to assign that as my magnify reduced button. Next, we want to go to customize dials. We want to find the control ring on the RF lens and I want to turn that off because I don't want that getting knocked by somebody when we are out filming. The multifunction bar we're going to turn off as well because we don't want that getting knocked as well. The settings that we use are going to be saved, so we don't need to be changing those settings. Now that we've done that, we need to adjust our settings. Our ISO is going to be at 400. We want a opening on our aperture as wide as possible. So on this lens it's at 1.8. And then our shutter speed needs to be double the frame rate. So in this case, the closest we can get to that is 1/50th. And what we want to do now is I want to register these settings as C1. So I'm going to click on the custom shooting mode, register settings, and register that as C1. Click OK. Okay, those are registered. Okay, so that's done. That is saved as C1. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is that is basically the basic settings that I need for video. Now I want to tweak the settings just a little bit. Movie image stabilization to enhanced. This is the mode we used when we filmed Lee Hall's video outside. It works very well. Okay, it's not as good as a dedicated image stabilization, of course, but it's good enough for what I need right now. And that's the only change I'm going to make is that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over to custom functions, register settings, and I'm going to register that as number 2. There we go. So now I have a 4K mode for when it's on a tripod, like the situation is now. I've got a 4K mode for when I'm handholding with a digital image stabilization. And the last mode I want to set up is my high frame rate mode. So that is going to be, it's going to be full HD at 60 frames a second, all-eye. Now the all-eye is the better codec for this job, okay? We don't want IPB because when you start color grading, the IPB codec just falls apart. We keep the movie digital image stabilization turned on. That's going to be left on. And of course, because we've changed the frame rate, we also need to change our shutter speed to be double that of our frame rate, which in this case is going to be 125. And then I can just go to register those settings, and we shall register that setting as number 3. So what I can do now, at any time, I can click my mode button. I can choose which mode I want to go to. So if I go to C1, we'll get 4K, 24 frames a second, no digital stabilization. If I switch over to C2, 4K, all-eye, 24p, but we also have the digital image stabilization. When I want to do some B-roll, just switch it to C3, and in there we have 60 frames a second, all-eye with the stabilization on. So that is how I'm going to set up my EOS R for video. So now I can now turn this off. I can slap on my 35mm f1.8 RF lens onto this body, and now that is going to be my dedicated video camera. So why did I go for a second EOS R? Well, the simple fact is I think it's too early to put all your money into the R5. It's got that overheating issue, which, you know, people are on the fence about it. People are saying it affects them, it doesn't affect them. Simple fact is sometimes I can be shooting for 6 hours out in outside. Sometimes indoors I'm shooting up to 4 hours, so the overheating is an issue for me. We have the Sony as an alternative one, so I'm looking at both cameras. I'll probably end up renting one to find out which is best, but that's not going to be till next year. So for the rest of this year, this is going to be my main video camera, and I think it will do a fantastic job. Plus, with the money saved from that camera, I also was able to buy the new studio lights, some new microphones. So I have a wireless microphone system now, so no longer do I have to sync up my audio in post. So let me know in the comments below what you think of the new studio lights and the new setup. I think it's fantastic. I'm loving it. But for now, I'm going to get out with this camera, do some macro adventures. I want to thank you for watching this video. Click like, comment and subscribe if you haven't done already. And as always, I'll see you on the next video. And all the footage will match up nicely. Colour science. So the A to D soft for there's no more soft HD videos for this. The A to D that was going to be filmed, the A to D used to film over there, is now up here as the overhead camera. Again, I have a that. Okay, halfway upgrade, halfway through. We don't want the camera to cut out halfway through. Da 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 da. But for this video, because it is a if you don't want to colour caliber, if you don't want to colour. So again, I'm not going to cover macro settings. I'm going to do that in a future video when we get the whatever. So this camera, oh fucking close to it. So this camera. Oops. Okay. Okay, calm down, calm down.